He stood in the doorway of the most important boardroom of his life, 6 minutes late, with motor oil on his sleeve and a backpack that had seen better days, and every single person at that gleaming conference table turned to look at him as though he had just committed a crime. And in the eyes of the woman standing at the head of the table, cool, composed, and carrying the kind of authority that filled a room before she even spoke, perhaps he had. If you believe in kindness and second chances, this story is for you. Please like this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because every story we tell here is a reminder that humanity still has good in it. Marcus Webb had not always been the kind of man who ran late. There was a time, not so many years ago, when he was the first one through the door, the last one to leave, the employee whose name managers passed between themselves like a quiet recommendation. He had been precise, reliable, and hungry in the way that only a young man with something to prove can be hungry. But that version of Marcus existed before the accident, before the hospital, before the quiet Tuesday morning when a social worker placed a 7-year-old girl named Lily into his arms and told him that his younger sister was gone and that he was all this child had left in the world. Becoming a father overnight is not a transition anyone can fully prepare for, and Marcus had learned that truth in the most exhausting, tender, and humbling way possible. Lily had nightmares that woke her screaming at 2 in the morning. She refused to eat anything that wasn't cut into precise triangles. She carried a worn stuffed rabbit named Captain everywhere she went and would dissolve into silent, trembling grief if she forgot him somewhere. Marcus learned every one of her rhythms, her fears, her small but sacred routines, and he rearranged his entire life to hold space for them. Because she was 7 years old and she had lost her mother and the world owed her at least one person who would not let her down. The job at Hargrove Consulting had felt like a lifeline. The salary was enough to keep their small apartment warm and Lily's tuition paid, and Marcus had thrown himself into the work with everything he had. He was good at it. His supervisor had told him so more than once. But the corporate world runs on its own kind of clock, indifferent to the small catastrophes of ordinary life, and ordinary life with a grieving child is rarely predictable. There had been mornings when Lily's anxiety made it impossible to get her through the school doors. There had been afternoons when the after-school program called because she was inconsolable and only he could reach her. Each time, Marcus had made up the hours, stayed late, sent work from his phone at midnight, but the absences accumulated like small debts, and debts in a corporate ledger eventually come due. On the morning he walked into that conference room late, he had been delayed because Lily had dropped Captain down a storm drain on the walk to school and had been so destroyed by the loss that she could not breathe, could not move, could not be reasoned with by any adult except him. He had spent 45 minutes lying on a cold sidewalk with his arm down a drain until his fingers found that rabbit, until he pulled it free and pressed it into her arms and watched the storm pass from her face like clouds clearing from the sun. He had gotten her to school. He had gotten himself to work. He was 6 minutes late, and there was motor oil on his sleeve from where the drain had scraped his arm, and he had not had time to notice. The woman at the head of the table was Victoria Hargrove, the founder's daughter and the company's newly appointed director of operations, and she had a reputation for precision that bordered on legend. She had restructured 2 departments in her first month. She did not believe in exceptions because, in her experience, exceptions were how standards eroded, and standards were the only thing that separated a company worth respecting from one that simply existed. She looked at Marcus Webb in the doorway, disheveled, late, unprofessional by every visible measure, and she made a decision before he ever had the chance to speak. The termination meeting was brief and not unkind in tone, but it was absolute. Victoria explained that the company required consistency, that this had not been an isolated incident, that she wished him well. Marcus sat across from her and did not argue, did not make excuses, did not tell her about the storm drain or the stuffed rabbit or the 7-year-old girl who had cried so hard that morning she had nearly made herself sick. He simply nodded, collected the small box of his belongings, and walked out into an afternoon that felt like it had been drained of color. He did not tell Lily that evening. He made her dinner, helped her with her read. I did not answer her right away. I looked at the water. I thought about 14 months of silent lunches and late-night document revisions and the one time she had thanked me. Genuinely, not professionally, when I had handled a crisis that could have cost her the company, and how I had gone home that night and felt something warm settle in my chest that I refused to examine too closely. I thought about how I had learned the exact tone of her voice when she was exhausted versus when she was simply serious. How I knew she took her coffee without sugar but kept sugar packets in her desk drawer for difficult mornings. How I had once stayed 3 hours past midnight not because she asked me to, but because I didn't want to leave her alone with a problem she hadn't solved yet. I told her the truth. I told her that some things feel easy because they are real, that I had spent 14 months convincing myself that what I felt was professionalism, was loyalty, was simply the dedication of someone who takes his work seriously. But standing beside her in that golden light, with her eyes asking me a question her voice had barely begun to form, I understood that I had not been pretending at all. I had simply been waiting for a moment honest enough to hold what I actually felt. She didn't speak for a long time. The music drifted from somewhere across the garden. The lake caught the last of the evening light and held it. And then she did something she had never done in 14 months. She reached out and took my hand. Not to maintain a performance, not because her mother was watching, not because her ex was nearby. She took my hand because she wanted to, and she held it the way you hold something you have been afraid to want for a very long time. We did not rush into anything. Life is not a film, and love that is real does not need to perform urgency. But things changed between us after that evening, quietly, gradually, the way seasons change, the way trust is built, the way two people stop pretending they don't already know the answer to a question they've been circling for too long. She laughed more. I learned that her softness had always been there, simply buried beneath years of proving herself in a world that had not made space for her to be anything other than strong. And I learned that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand declarations, but with a small, honest admission that pretending to love someone turned out to be the most truthful thing you had ever done. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that real love is quiet and patient and sometimes disguised as ordinary Tuesday mornings, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support keeps these stories alive for every heart that needs them. Speech balloon, and before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever realized you loved someone only when you stopped pretending you didn't? Because sometimes the bravest thing we ever do is admit what we already know.